Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and this time we're seeing a tale entitled Revenge of the Jedi. That has very little to do with revenge or Jedi, quite frankly. I'm your host, Nathan P. Butler. What we're looking at this time is the newspaper strips once again. Now, this is a story that ran from November 15th of 1982 up until January 23rd of 1983. Now, this is 1983, early 1983, so it's a big push right now towards Return of the Jedi, which of course had some materials out there as Revenge of the Jedi, not necessarily on purpose, some kind of slipped through, but we had that whole fiasco with the name, right? You can see that all over the place online. I'm not going to go too in-depth with that because that's not pertaining to this specific story, but it's using that name. So it's something that should sound familiar to people who are paying attention to Star Wars publishing and Star Wars films at the time. Now, in the lead-up to The Empire Strikes Back, the previous film, they'd used Boba Fett as a way to get people interested in the film. He showed up in the holiday special in 1978, and he was a preview figure that you could order as a mail-away through the Kenner Toys of the time. He, of course, showed up in the holiday special, got a lot of people's attention. That's the one that George Lucas says he would love to see burned, all the copies of it burned. You'll have my holiday special bootleg when you pry it from my cold, dead hands. Yeah, it's not all that great. But, just VHS tape. It's the only way to get it at this point. You can, however, see, for what it's worth, the Boba Fett cartoon on the Blu-rays, if you pay attention to how to get into all the special features and such about The Empire Strikes Back. Anyway, they used Boba Fett to get people hyped up about The Empire Strikes Back. So who are they going to use to get people hyped up about Return of the Jedi? Well, one of the mail-away figures was Admiral Ackbar, so of course he becomes part of the focus of, well, what role is he going to play in the film? Where you can find these newspaper strips today. If you are one of those who want to pick up that Russ Cochran set, you'll find it in Volume 2. Starts on page 309, goes to the end of Volume 2. The next story will pick up with Volume 3. You can also find it in the pages of Classic Star Wars, number 13. It actually picks up right after the end of Ice World here, so it's actually kind of splitting this page right here up about, a third of the way or so down the page. It goes on into Classic Star Wars number 14, the one that I usually refer to as Luke as Aquaman. We'll deal with that here in a moment. In this issue, of course, it doesn't take the entire issue as is usually the case. It instead continues on basically until the midpoint, about the midpoint of it. You see the Millennium Falcon flying off into the sunset there, and then we move to the Executor. That's where we split between those two stories. Now, I mentioned the whole issue with Admiral Ackbar, and you might be saying, wait a second, you dropped the Ackbar thing. What were you getting at? Well, it's because of something you don't see in classic Star Wars, because it is re-edited. It has blended things back together. It has added new artwork, etc., etc., etc. Now, bear in mind, when we look back at the original newspaper strips, you sort of had two endings to every story. You had those daily strips that would end, and then they would have a weekend edition that would have sort of a full page of new information, of new story content, but it had to just sort of repeat the ending in a way, or add a little bit to the ending, so that those who were reading the Sunday editions could see that, etc., etc. I mean, it's another one of those things with just, if you got a story that's going to be running on the weekends and on weekdays, not everybody necessarily reads all of those or buys all of those, so what are you going to do? Well, one of the things you can do is just sort of repeat yourself over and over again. So each of them had sort of two endings, which meant that there were two comic strips per bigger strip that would tend to say, next time it's such and such. And sometimes classic Star Wars would take that first ending and use that as the ending of the story. Sometimes they'd take the second ending. It just kind of depends on which one we're looking at. So in the original newspaper strips, you get essentially two endings to Ice World. The first ending, down here at the bottom, starts Monday. A special new adventure introducing Admiral Ackbar, soon to be featured in the next film of the Star Wars saga, Revenge of the Jedi. Now, you would think that that means Revenge of the Jedi is the next film, but no. That wound up being the title used for the next story of the newspaper strips. Very clever of a way to say, whoops, we didn't mean to call it that. We meant return. Oh, well. Now, of course, it has another ending. And that second ending page, very similar down at the bottom. Beginning tomorrow, a special, because this is a Sunday edition, right? A special new adventure introducing Admiral Akbar, soon to be featured in the next film of the Star Wars saga, Revenge of the Jedi. Right, so it's the same thing, different art, a way to hype people up for the comic strips and tie it into Return of the Jedi. Great promotional stuff. It's one of those cool elements you see when you look at the original newspaper strips in something like this, rather than seeing them reprinted and recolored and such in here. You can also find this one, by the way, of course, as the last story, or I guess the last full story, to be found in Classic Star Wars Volume 2, The Rebel Storm. Issue number 14, right, Aquaman Luke. That's the one that's the last issue of that volume out of the 3. Now, the gist here is that the Executor now has roared to life. Uh-oh. We're in trouble. Wow. Was that Chumbawamba or was that Spice Girls? Either way. Ugh. Anyway, the Executor has now roared to life, and the Rebels have limited time to get the heck off of Yavin 4. To do that, they're going to need some help, because there is that Imperial blockade. What they do is they contact the Mon Calamari, allies of the Alliance. This is sort of bringing them further into the fold as true allies here. And the idea is that the Mon Calamari can strike at some parts of the blockade, drawing the Imperials to allow the rebellion to get through. But first, they've got to go and make contact with the Mon Calamari. To do so, they of course are going to go through the most famous Mon Calamari of them all, Admiral Akbar, who at this point is part of the rebellion. We will later get all that great background about him formerly being a slave of Tarkin, and get several contradictory stories about how he got out of that. We'll see him playing a somewhat supporting, somewhat major role on Mon Calamari in a storyline that's not in The Force Unleashed 2, the game, but is in The Force Unleashed 2's novelization, something to give that a little bit more depth quite a while later on. But at this point, we just know he's a major rebel leader, he's a Mon Calamari, so he's going to bring them in. Problem is, as they go to meet them, they've lost contact. The Mon Calamari are stranded on the planet Deluge. Thank goodness they are, fish people, basically. Deluge, aptly named, deluge like a flood, except spelled differently here. A deluge is this watery, swamp, nasty kind of world. As soon as they set down, they wind up finding the Millennium Falcon being grabbed by this sea creature thing, right, that you see the arms of here on the cover, very, very terrifying and such. And the Mon Calamari have to help them get it free while they're pursued by Imperials, and these Imperials have these different sort of ground vehicles, hover vehicles and such, and they're kind of running away from the Imperials. They're trying to get access to the Imperial vehicles so they have something to use other than being on foot, etc., until eventually they use the Imperials themselves as targets for this sea creature, so it grabs it, shakes it all to crap, and in doing so winds up diverting its attention from the Millennium Falcon, so the Mon Calamari can cut it free, and they're out of there. It's not a story that has a lot of depth, I guess, when it comes to just this story in and of itself. It is cool to see Admiral Akbar finally entering the newspaper strips. That's a great thing, although he's not going to really be a major player for the rest of it. He's really kind of just here for this. But it's, again, moving the plot along, setting up what's coming. We've seen the power gym. Okay, we got the power gym. We know about Hoth now. Okay, that's where they can go. Now let's set up who's going to help them get off and through the blockade, etc. And don't forget, the Executor is ready to go. It's just another stepping stone in this broader arc that we're getting with the newspaper strips set between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. So broadly speaking here, is this an essential read for the entire Star Wars saga, for someone trying to see it all? No, I don't think so. It does give us a chance to introduce Admiral Akbar at the time. It does give us another way to push towards that whole blockade running thing for the Rebel Alliance as they evacuate Yavin, but I don't think that this in and of itself is essential. I mean, yeah, it gives us the next step in the process. It introduces Admiral Akbar. I don't think we necessarily need to know about how they hooked up with the Mon Calamari on Deluge in order to understand the Mon Calamari feint that will let them escape later on. So, not an essential read, I don't think, but again, a solid story, even though nothing truly consequential. Certainly nothing that seems like it really befits the whole hype about, look, it's Admiral Akbar, he's coming! Then again, neither did his appearance in the film, in a lot of ways. Same thing with Boba Fett, of course. Holiday special appearance wasn't all, wow, amazing, but at the same time, it's not like he played a giant role in The Empire Strikes Back. His role was inflated by the popularity of the character because of the hype. Same with Admiral Akbar. At least he made a more substantial contribution and had more spoken lines, though. I think. I haven't gone and counted them up. I'm sure somebody will now and post in the comments if I'm wrong. Go ahead. Sounds good to me. At least you're interacting here. In any event, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the readers.